Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it
Yes, it looks
started.
like someone has started it.
All right. So we're going to finish up with lesson 2, cover project approach tonight. What uh, predictive life cycle has served pretty well for the last about 50 years. Uh, Customers change, global markets are changing, and things are not as process based as they used to be. So what we have is we require more and better ways to solve problems, create solutions, and offer businesses and organizations a wider range of value options. So we're taking uh, these days we're taking a look more at delivering value than we are to just meeting things like phase gates. Okay. And what you need to know for the test is that uh, project teams are increasingly asked to focus more on intended outcomes rather than predefined deliverables. And we've talked about some of the frameworks so far. Waterfall. We've talked about using Agile. What I did was I put in the chat um, some of the uh, frameworks that you may see on the test. So when they say Agile, many kinds, um, Agile methods can be used with a variety of frameworks. Um, some of uh, the predominant ones are Scrum, which is a uh, really a basic framework that you'll use, uh, uh, and it is an agile framework. There's also SAFe, which is what AT&T uh, uses. So, and SAFe stands for Scaled Agile Framework. What SAFe does is it takes the best of a number of frameworks, puts them together, and really concentrates on the communications paths that have to be, who people need to communicate with, when they need to communicate, and really what information that needs to be communicated. So I hope you'll excuse me tonight, having a few challenges here. All right. But Lean Six Sigma uh, is really what it uh, is talking about. It's using lean methods and Six Sigma methods put together. Now, I have no idea what Prince 2 is. Um, the other ones I haven't heard about. So most likely you're going to see Safe and Scrum and perhaps Lean Six Sigma appear on the test. Right. All right. Let's take a minute. Would someone like to share about which project management framework you use?
I use Six Sigma.
If you're saying something, you'll need to speak up. I can't hear you. So nobody here uses any type of project management framework.
Yeah, this
No
is Sherry.
waterfall, no agile, no safe, no scrum, no Six Sigma.
I use a bit of both, hybrid.
My projects are hybrid as well.
All right. Someone's speak up and just say something so that
I think
can
we're
make sure
speaking,
my
but
mic
it's,
that my
yeah.
earphones are working.
Also manage some hybrid.
Alberto, you were cutting out pretty bad.
Harry, can you hear me?
Okay. So I'm not able to hear you guys. Let me try a different port on this computer. Can someone speak up now?
Can you hear me?
Oh, no, I can hear you.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
So what type of project management net framework do you use, Susan?
I would have to go with agile or a hybrid. It's really it's AT&T, so we have a different set of standards for the products that I'm working with.
Okay. In
It's
what
kind of
way?
hard to describe. I would say I primarily project
Not working
manage.
there.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. It's I primarily project manage based on the status of multiple projects. Like I'm juggling about anywhere from 150 to 300 projects at a time. So it's not just one project from start to finish, it's multiples on a daily basis. It's confusing to describe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's AT&T. Yeah.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I'm familiar with the way things go sometimes at
right,
AT&T.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody use SAFe? SAFe framework?
I had one project that was actually true safe with release train. We had, you know, consistent deliveries and consistent, backlog grooming with the same teams over and over again. It was absolutely amazing. Very rare in AT&T to have that. We were kind of left alone. We had bucket of money. It was great. And then process got in the way and no, you can't do this anymore. So
Oh,
it was a great like 2 years. We just perfect. I loved it,
wow.
but doesn't really work with AT&T overhead a lot of the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we don't we shoot ourselves in the foot by not being, allowing things to incubate. But okay. Um, so I'm going to ask you to answer or reinforce your answer for the last question. Do you prefer safe over chaos?
yeah, way we were doing it, which was the correct way, it was amazing. I don't like our hybrid approach in the CTX world.
Were you working with any coaching when you were using
I did
Safe?
have I did have the availability to have coaches, but the way I came onto the train as it was fairly mature, and I did have like another there was another art that was parallel to it. So we were part of we're trying to set up a solution train for this program, but we didn't get there. But had another RTE that was kind of helping me out on the side. Because my
Okay.
first time being an RTE.
It's a nice challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. I would
Uh,
love to stand up an actual one again, another train again.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with a number of arts uh, before I retired. So that yeah, and I worked with some uh, really good RTEs, and it uh, you know was a very good experience each time. Okay, let's move on. Okay, what we're seeing these days um, with the dynamic work environment is that we need to tailor the development approaches that we use. And predictive is um, good for some projects. The majority of the projects that you're going to see are going to be either hybrid or adaptive uh, if they're not in some of the uh, classic predictive industries. Now, I keep using construction, and even with construction, there are new methods that are coming out where they're doing things in an iterative manner, including building buildings. Now, I read about one building that was being constructed 4 floors at a time, and the way it was engineered, they built the first 4 floors, uh, rented them out. Their occupancy was nearly 100%. Then they started working on the next 4 floors and kept repeating that up to the total height of the building. So uh, even in some of the classic predictive projects, things are changing. Yeah. So what kind of advantages do you think uh, the tailored development approach could give you?
Gives you the ability to control the project, I guess.
In what way?
As predictive says, is give you the ability to predict by, I guess, in the example you gave, filling up the first full floor. And with that,
Okay.
I guess that same money used to add the other 4 floors.
Okay. Yeah. It uh, that, that's a good example of a hybrid approach where they're using traditional methods, uh, predictive methods, to do each of the modules of 4 floors and doing it in an iterative way. So that's leaning more toward agile, using agile methods. Yeah. One of the things, one of the advantages of a tailored development approach is that you know, the you can discover what value the organization needs to deliver and deliver that in an iterative manner, because uh, what we've seen over the decades actually is that using purely predictive methods for developing software especially has resulted in uh, the majority of software projects not being delivered because they were either the customer no longer needed the functionality once everything was developed, or that just in general the business uh, had changed and it wasn't viable to finish the project. It was eating too much money. The predictions have not always been that accurate, especially with software development. Okay. Now, remember we talked about servant leaders last time? Oh, somebody's got to remember.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to keep talking here. I like a lot of interaction. So, whenever you see an exclamation point, that's something that you may see on the test or something related to that. So in this case, it's servant leaders influence projects and encourage the organization to think differently. Okay. What you need to do as a project manager and as a servant leader is to understand what the customer needs. And if you're using agile methods, you'd probably, if you're using Scrum especially, you'd you'd work with the product owner to understand what what the current state of the business is and what they see as the future of the business. Yeah. Right. There are what we've seen 3 project management development approaches: predictive, adaptive, and hybrid. So understand what the characteristics of each one are. Certainty about requirements. Now, with predictive, the characteristics of the predictive projects are that it's plan driven. You have a plan up front that you create and you follow that as closely as possible. It's a linear sequence of activities that are usually divided into phases. So you'll have, and we'll see some graphics on this in just a little bit, that you'll do requirements, you'll do design, implementation, then testing. Okay. Phase completion is governed by phase gates. Generally what I've seen, and I think is prevalent in the industry, is that phase gates are based on completion of the previous work. Okay, so once the design is completed, or the requirements are completed, there's a gate that says, okay, you can begin design. Now, with predictive, it's assuming that you can with can predict what needs to be done when with high accuracy. Now, when they say certainty about requirements, you've got to be certain from the very beginning, okay, because the requirements are not going to change. Now, that's really putting a burden on the team that's actually gathering the requirements, because when you have to change something, you've got to go through a change control board. Additional money has to be approved, and any of the risks that could be associated with a change need to be evaluated and managed. Okay. The thing is, when we say that we have high certainty about requirements, can vary from industry to industry. If we're talking construction, yeah, there's a really good history there. But when we're talking about developing software, we can have our best guess, as to whether or not the requirements are accurate from the very beginning. Okay, and we have to think that we've covered everything to be able to deliver what the customer needs. Now, with an adaptive project, you're going to have changes all throughout. Okay. So it is, and we're going to cover this in a little bit here. It's both iterative and incremental. So, and we'll go through a definition of those two terms. There's usually a time boxed cadence. Call them iterations or sprints. Or if you're using a Kanban, then there's a continuous flow. You may not deliver every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, but you're able to see and manage the deliveries throughout the project life. Now, if we're using adaptive methods, where we do know that we don't have all of the requirements at the beginning. We have our best guess. We'll share some things with the customer. We'll take the customer's feedback and adapt what our deliveries are to what the current customer needs are. Yeah. So with adaptive projects, yeah, they're definitely built on the assumption of high degree of change. Adaptive projects are changing all the time, and there's a high tolerance of risk. We set up guardrails to understand how much risk can be taken, who can manage a certain amount of risk. Okay. And with the hybrid approach, we try to take the best elements of both predictive and adaptive, roll those into the project management plan. Okay, so you're taking pieces of each, and the example of the building being built 4 stories at a time is an example of a hybrid approach. Now, you'll see perhaps some other definitions of project and product in literature, or depending on the framework that you're using. SAFe has a different concept of product and project. Okay, as a matter of fact, SAFE doesn't use the term project. Okay. But know this for the test. This is the PMI definition, so that you can have multiple programs that extend through the life of a product. Okay. That product can go through, in this case, 4 phases: introduction of the product, growth of the product, okay, maturity, and then decline or requirement or retirement. Excuse me. Okay. So in order to achieve this, you can have multiple projects. Okay. And each of these phases can have either one or more projects to take that product through the phases. Okay. All right, some of the key definitions. Product is part of a project. Products have their own life cycles. Okay, like we were talking about. Cycles, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline and retirement. So product management is really a key interface where the program manager works with the product manager to assess the market and see where how long the product will be viable. Okay, so every product, it's an end of life. Whether it's in 6 months, it could be 20 years, but it's going to hit an end of life. But the only one I can think of that doesn't is, say, a buggy. Excuse me. Buggy whips are still being produced, and there's still companies out there that make them. Okay. Know that product owners are responsible for maximizing the value of the product and are accountable for the end product. So let's see, we might have another definition here for product management. Yep. Not going to drain it for you. I'm going to be lucky to get through these slides. Yeah. So take a screen grab if you want. All right, question. Who wants to volunteer to explain why projects often have both a project manager and a product owner? What are some reasons?
Area of expertise.
Yeah,
Could be seen as a conflict of interest to have a project manager and a project owner be the same person.
yeah, it can be seen as a conflict of interest. Anybody else?
They have different goals. So the product owner's there to maximize the value of the product. The project manager is there to make sure the project goes smoothly as a whole.
Yep. All good answers. Appreciate that. All right. Which type of life cycle is depicted here?
Predictive.
Yep.
Predictive.
Yep. Any other answers? What gave it away? Why does this jump out as predictive?
It's just very straightforward.
Okay.
All the deliverables are at the end.
Yep. Yep. That's the biggest indicator. When you see deliverables at the end, it is a predictive project. All right. This is just illustrating the phases associated with a predictive project. Feasibility study. No. If I die while delivering this, just carry on and, break up by 7. Um, the development phases then are design, build, test, and deploy. And then closing out the project. Okay. PMI used to have a lot of questions on the PMP exam that related to each of these phases. What were the inputs? What were the outputs? Um, who was responsible for what? The test today is totally different. You won't be asked what inputs are, what outputs are. You'll be given a scenario and will be given the 4 answers, and you have to pick the best of the 4. Now, with an adaptive life cycle, you have both iterations, or you have iterations from the start to the end. Okay, so each iteration is the same. You go through the same activities each time. You have the same ceremonies with that PMI. With this version of the slides, you need to know the term ceremonies. Moved to Scrum and SAFe have moved away from the use of ceremonies, the word ceremonies, to the word event for those. All right. The big thing is at the end of each iteration, you get feedback from the customer or the product owner, and the backlog is reprioritized. Now, each iteration ideally is somewhere around 2 weeks. Okay, so every 2 weeks, you're going through a development and testing of new value that you're adding to the product. Okay? At the end of those 2 weeks, you do this. You evaluate the feedback. You make any changes necessary to your processes or how you're delivering things. And the product owner owns the backlog, so that you reprioritize that backlog every 2 weeks to make sure that you're delivering the right value to the customer at that particular period of time. So in addition to iterations, what we're delivering is incremental value. Each iteration adds on to the previous iteration, all the previous iterations. And that value is deliverable to the customer, or at least you can demonstrate it to the customer and get feedback to make sure that you're delivering the right things. All right. One term you definitely need to know is cadence. It refers to the timing and frequency of delivery of project deliverables. Now, cadence is, if we're using a SAFe framework, there's a cadence for each iteration. Each iteration is in the same cadence, meaning that the same period is used for each incremental delivery of value. There are also other cadences. The actual releases are on a particular cadence, and that uh, will be uh, be constructed from each of the cadences below it. Okay, what I mean is that if you've got multiple teams working on delivering a product, they should each be on the same cadence, meaning that if team A is using a 2-week cadence for the iterations, team B, team C, all the way to how many ever teams you have, should be on that same cadence. Now, releases are not every 2 weeks. That you plan releases out, and you generally plan to release new value to the customer at specific intervals, total number of iterations. Okay, so the cadence of the deliveries to the customer, not as frequent as the development of the product. Okay, so that you may see like a 4, 6, 8 week cadence on deliveries to the customers. Now, PMI extends this to predictive projects so that you can have a single cadence where you have one delivery at the end of the project. Okay. You can have multiple deliveries, so the deliveries are separated into parts that are not necessarily sequential, not necessarily the same amount of time in between the deliveries. And then what I was talking about earlier is periodic cadence, where on a fixed schedule, like in this case, monthly, bi-monthly, could be even longer, the delivery to the customer is scheduled. Right. Any questions on cadence?
Does this need to be predetermined when in the planning stage of this, or can this be changed throughout the project? Like, when is it typically set up?
Yeah, it should be consistent. Shouldn't change it throughout the life of the project. I mean, especially at the development team level, the Scrum team level. Okay, their 2-week cadence should be consistent all the way from the start of the project through the end of the project. Any other questions? this illustrates some of the adaptive development approaches, where you have an initial vision, create a product backlog. So these are for deliveries for the entire product. Okay. For each iteration or sprint, you're going to develop user stories. You're going to prioritize those. The team's going to develop them. You're going to deliver to the customer, get feedback from the customer, and incorporate that into new user stories. Okay. There, if the customer doesn't like what you're delivering, you know, if it's a substandard idea, the product may be dropped. Okay. What this gives you are multiple times where you can evaluate the applicability of the project, the product. Okay. So that it's better to drop development on a product when you discover that the customer doesn't no longer needs it, rather than trying to take it to completion. Okay. If the customer wants something that's not necessarily what you're delivering, but it's still within, you know, the scope. I hate to use the word scope. The capabilities of the product, and then we call pivot, change direction, adjust the product backlog, which will then change the sprint backlog. Okay. And then once the
What is the
definition of
product? What is the product backlog?
say again, please.
The definition of product backlog.
Those are all the features that need to be delivered to the customer. Okay. And once your definition of done is met, that's when you can deliver the product. Got a quiz. We've got 4 terms on the left, and we've got 5 blanks on the right, which tells me that one of these terms is used at least twice. So, project professionals use a what or method?
Developmental approach.
Yeah. Which can be predictive, iterative, incremental, adaptive, or hybrid to create and evolve a
Deliverable.
Deliverable.
okay. Yep. Which is a unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service. Project passes through a series of logically related activities called
Phases.
yep. From its start to its completion. This entire process is called a
Life cycle.
all right. Acceptance of a what is required to complete a process phase or project.
Deliverable.
Deliverable.
Deliverable. Yep. All right. Yeah, we're filling them in. All right. Hybrid life cycle and development approaches, as we've been saying, they're accomplished by tailoring, using the best that you can pull from predictive project and from adaptive projects. Okay. If the requirements are uncertain, or as they say here, risky, it's a good approach to use. Okay. Also, when you can chunk your deliverables up, okay, a hybrid life cycle may be useful if you're not using a totally adaptive life cycle. Yeah. And again, uses iterative and incremental development. So what we're talking about with iterative is what? What does iterative mean?
Like a time box, perhaps?
Okay. Doing it over and over and over. Incremental means that we're adding value at each iteration. Okay. Know what these two terms are and what the distinction is between the two. Some examples of hybrid approaches, using agile or iterative practices within a predictive framework where you have a fixed amount of time to be able to deliver. And if the customer is looking for, or if you need feedback from the customer multiple times within that product life cycle, that's when you can use iterative practices. Okay. The opposite to that is using predictive artifacts or processes. And I tend to lean toward artifacts within an adaptive life cycle where you're actually doing something like a project plan, where you're creating requirements, where you're doing design. Okay. But and at the same time, you're delivering on a cadence, or could be delivering to your customer on a cadence. All right. All right. So all of these things can be tailored. The project life cycle, development life cycle components, such as what the deliverables are, when the deliverables, uh, when the definition of done is met for each one of those. You can tailor the ways that you work. Right? And the rest here. Any questions on these? Okay. All right. How do you determine what you need to do? How do you determine how you need to deliver to the customer? Okay. And I do apologize.
Are you asking a question?
Sure.
No, I'm saying, were you asking a question with that one? Would that be
Yeah, we
that would
can
be the
ask a
project sponsor,
question.
wouldn't it?
What's
That would be
that?
the project sponsor, right? That would be the project sponsor, correct?
I'm sorry. Could you say one more time? I'm in a noisy area.
I said that will be the project sponsor, correct?
You need to work with the project sponsor, definitely. Project sponsor should give you input, but you need to take that input and determine what type of team you have, when deliverables are needed, and that will probably be from your product management team. So then you can determine what type of development approach to take. It shouldn't be up to one of the project sponsors by any means. Okay. All right. Some questions that you need to ask. Is all of the work planned? Is everything laid out where you could use a predictive method? Or do you have a general idea of what needs to be delivered that need feedback along the way? That's when you can use a hybrid or an adaptive framework. Okay. Some basic things like, how does the team prefer to work? They want to work 4 12-hour days, or do they want to work 5 8-hour days? They want to work from 9 to 5. Is it from 8 to 3? Those are things that you need to take into consideration. And yeah, you should plan out for 40 hours a week. Don't want to have overtime planned in, and ideally you don't want to plan for less than a full work week. Now I've seen some success where teams base their work week on the deliverables being accepted by the product manager. And once they're accepted, you break. That's it. You come back at the start of the next iteration. Okay. And determining what cadence. Is it a single deliverable at the end? Do you need to deliver value incrementally along the way? Okay. Knowing what the customer wants and assessing if they have a really good idea of what they want. You can use predictive methods. If there's any question about what the product needs to do or how it needs to perform, you're better off using a hybrid or a pure adaptive framework. Okay. Okay. 3 other ones here: schedule, risk appetite thresholds, and just basically are sprints helpful. Was there a question there? All right. Now, based on the complexity, this is a model developed by Ralph Stacey, assessing how concrete the requirements are. It's along the vertical axis. Okay, close to agreement means that you have a really good idea of what the requirements are actually to deliver that product. And plotting that against technical capability, all the way from on the left close to certainty, where you know exactly what technical capabilities need to be present in the project team, all the way up to far from certainty, where you really don't have that good of an idea of what you're going to be, what expertise you're going to need to deliver the project. So with this model, Stacy's model, when you're in the simple area, and again, these are arbitrary depending on the uh, the project itself. You know, whether they're things like construction, standard construction projects. Okay. Simple ones can be handled by a linear approach, or this is just another term for using predictive methods. Okay. When you get into the complicated and complex, it's where you're really, the complex is really where you're pushing the envelope on new development. It's better to use adaptive approaches. And chaos is really, you should avoid that at all, practically at any cost. Okay. Unless you have really good sponsorship and they're willing to, the sponsors are willing to take the risks. You know, neither straight adaptive approaches are going to work, and definitely not linear, not predictive. Okay. Questions on this graph? Excuse me for a minute. We've been going for about an hour. Why don't we take a couple of minutes, stand up if you can, move around a little bit, and I'm going to get some water here. So let's take about 3 minutes. Okay, any questions on this graph? And when each approach needs will be the most effective. Okay. This is a radar graph that allows you to, what you do is you plot the responses from the team and use this feedback to determine what type of project it needs to be, whether it's adaptive, uh, hybrid, or predictive. Okay, so you'd send out a questionnaire, okay, and be able to assess the culture. Okay. The project itself and the team. Okay. And depending on where the responses lie, the inner circle here indicates using an agile approach. The middle circle indicates a hybrid approach. And then predictive approaches are on the outside, okay, where the team's highly experienced, team size is right, the criticality of the uh, project is high, okay? Okay, we've been talking about iterative and incremental. Okay. If you're using predictive methods, um, iterative and incremental deliveries are not the way to go. As you move from predictive through hybrid to adaptive, okay, you increase the uh, iterative and incremental uh, deliveries for the teams. Yeah. So that iterations and increments are compatible with each other. Yeah. So, and you'll see them used mostly in hybrid and adaptive projects. And it allows you to deliver value earlier in the product life cycle than you would if you just use predictive methods where you deliver everything at the very end. All right, let's see if this video is going to work. Let me know, and you're going to have to yell at me if you cannot hear it.
And I hear it.
We don't hear anything yet.
You don't hear anything?
No.
All right, let me see if I can increase the volume. No, that's not where I'm at. There we go. Let's see if we can do it. All right, let's restart it.
There's no audio yet.
You can't hear yet? Can anybody hear it?
No.
Nope.
No. Okie dokie. Let's try it again.
Can you send a link in chat?
This is embedded in the PowerPoint, so it's not an external link. Let me try this.
Henry, when you're sharing, are you sharing your computer audio as well? I know that's a silly question.
I had to initially, yeah. Stop sharing. Share. Let's see.
The word iterate.
There we go.
Yeah, now.
All right.
Meaning to repeat. Thus, an iterative way of working repeats itself over and over, optimizing itself each time it does. In an iterative process, work flows into the product backlog from minimum business increments and from the release roadmap. The product backlog is where the team collects all the work flowing to the team. The product owner prioritizes the product backlog, signaling to the team what work is the most important. At the start of each iteration, the team pulls the work they plan to do from the product backlog into the iteration backlog. This is a key point. The team pulls the amount of work it thinks it can get done during the iteration, not the product owner, team manager, or stakeholders. The iteration is the time box around the team's work. The team starts with the iteration planning and ends with the iteration review. Agile teams usually choose between an iteration length of 1 to 4 weeks, with 2 weeks being the most common choice. Regularly, the team meets for a coordination meeting, also called a stand-up or scrum. The stand-up helps the team coordinate and work in a quick and informal way. The iteration review ends the iteration. This review has 2 parts. It reviews the product and solution built in the iteration and the process, how the team worked together, and what got in their way. In the demo, the team showcases what they accomplished in the iteration. The demo focuses on value delivered and feedback from stakeholders. In the retrospective, the team takes time away from their busy schedule to reflect on how they worked together in the iteration. What aspects made them go faster and be successful? What aspects got in their way of reaching their goals? The team looks both internally, inside the team, and externally, outside the team. The team also lays out a plan to fix some of the points that got in their way during the next iteration. When an iteration is complete, we go back and start over with the iteration planning and pulling work from product backlog into the iteration backlog during the next planning. The agile iterative process contains a series of artifacts and ceremonies. Artifacts are the objects produced within an iteration. Ceremonies are activities that take place during an iteration. For example, the product backlog is an artifact. It's the complete list of work required to create the product. It collects all the work flowing to the team. The iteration backlog is another artifact. That's the list of work to be completed in the current iteration, and it's supposed to be done in the order determined by the team. There are a couple more artifacts that aren't shown on our diagram. User stories capture a description of a feature from an end-user perspective. A user story describes the type of user, what they want, and why. A burndown chart is a graphic representation of how quickly the team is working through user stories. We actually touched on most of the ceremonies earlier. These include iteration planning, the coordination meeting, the iteration demonstration, or demo, and the iteration retrospective.
Okay. The video mentioned a number of things, and we're going to take a look at an overview of an Agile ceremony shortly, and we'll discuss the other ones in detail as follows. Product backlog, iteration planning, user stories, iteration planning are all covered in lesson 3. Lesson 4 will hit on iteration retrospective. Then in lesson 5, we'll take a deeper look at what burn down charts are and iteration demos. Okay. All right. So Scrum is an agile framework. Okay. It gives suggestions on how work can be organized to maximize value to the end user. You have particular roles within Scrum. You've got a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a development team. Okay. Now, an Agile framework, especially a scaled Agile framework, includes leadership, may require changes in the company culture, and needs to touch other areas, human resources, legal, and just about every organization within the business. All right. Ceremonies is an older term. That's what you'll see on the test. So there are, four ceremonies here: sprint planning, and sprint planning requires the development team, scrum masters, facilitator, and then the product owner in order to plan for the current sprint. So that's ideal, and ideally a 2-week period. Now, every day there is what we call a daily scrum or stand up. Okay. This is the team only. You don't have anybody else in there besides the team. They can describe their work. Historically, 3 questions have been asked. What did you do since the last stand up? What are you planning on doing today? And do you have any impediments that you need help on? Okay. The daily scrum should be maximum of 15 minutes. If there's anything else that needs to be covered, it should be done in a meet after. Okay, where just the appropriate people are involved and the rest of the team can be dismissed. And, one big thing, it is definitely not a status meeting. Okay. You're looking at what you did, what you're going to do, any impediments. Now, at the end of each sprint, you're going to have a review, and this review can include a demo. And, statement of the obvious, I think, is that it's held at the end of each sprint. Okay, so that you can take a look and evaluate what was delivered within that sprint, how it was delivered, and any changes that need to be made. Okay. So this sprint review includes the team, the product owners, stakeholders. I mean, even customers can attend and give feedback. And then each sprint, you're going to have a retrospective. So that's where you're going to identify any improvements to performance, collaboration, development methods that you want to attack or change in subsequent sprints. And one of the things is that with Scrum, everything that you're doing needs to be part of the sprint backlog. And only those things in the sprint backlog get worked. So you need to work between the development team and the product owner, especially if there are any improvements that need to be included in the next sprint, and make sure that they're prioritized at the correct level.
How much time is typically between each sprint? Like, do you go like 2 weeks and then you wait like a week or two, or are there days,
Nope.
or does it depend?
Nope. Your sprints run consecutively. There's no time in between them. So that if you end a sprint on, say, a Wednesday, Thursday morning begins the next sprint. And you'll do your sprint
Right.
planning as the first thing for that sprint, and go through, deliver, and put together the value that you're going to deliver, and then do your retrospective at the very end. And then the next business day, you start the next sprint. There's no downtime whatsoever. Okay. All right. Pure Agile ceremonies. And you may see the term events, but for the test, no Agile ceremonies. Product strategy meeting, where the longer term goals for the product are agreed to between the product owner and the sponsors, and then brought back to the dev team. Okay. The daily stand up, we just covered that. Now, saying it's not necessarily daily, if you're doing product development and delivering value in an incremental manner, then yeah, you usually need to do it daily. You'll have a backlog refinement ceremony. The product owner will take the lead on that and do the prioritization. This will be each sprint with you'll have a retrospective at the end of not only a sprint, but what SAFE refers to as a planning interval. So at the end of each planning interval, there'll be a larger retrospective. All right. That ends lesson 2. Ready to start lesson 3?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Go. All right. What we're going to be talking about in this lesson is planning the project itself. The objectives for this particular lesson are outlined here. I'm not going to drain the slide. If you have a question, please ask it. Okay, any questions? Okay. So topic A is going to be planning projects. So you're going to hear this a lot, and you need to know what the components of a project management plan are. Okay. With predictive, you'll see these particular areas: execution, monitoring, controlling, and closing a project, okay, along with others. And a project plan, okay, or project management plan in adaptive or hybrid projects are going to establish your guardrails. Okay. What we want teams to be able to do is to tailor the way they work and have enough autonomy to be able to quickly act on any of the issues that come up that are within their purview. Yeah. Now, the project management plan itself includes the project management plan. There are some subsidiary plans, baselines for the budget for the time that it's going to take, the resources that are needed, and there are some additional components. Now, we covered in the last session, I believe, or the time before that, some of the plans, subsidiary plans that are not part of the overall project management plan. So you're going to need to know what's involved, what the components are for a project management plan. Okay, so subsidiary plans, scope, requirements, schedule, cost management, quality management, resource management, all the way through. Okay. Your baselines are going to be your scope baseline, your schedule baseline, and your cost baseline. Some additional components of the project management plan are going to be the change management plan. How are you going to make changes? This is especially important with predictive projects. You need to lay out a change management process. Configuration management plan, performance measurement baseline. Okay. How have projects like this worked before? The project life cycle, identifying that. The development approach that's being taken, and then when management reviews are planned. Do you want me to copy these and put them in the chat?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's not letting me. Well,
I can
I
take a
apologize.
screenshot. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I'll take a screenshot.
Okay. And we're still working on the student bundles. I asked about those. PMI's changed the way that they're doing things. So it's taking longer and longer to get the keys to the student bundles. Okay, so everybody have a screenshot who wants to take one? I'll take the resounding silence as a resounding yes. Okay. Project documents. Okay. Documentation and content created by the team to plan and manage a project effectively. Some documents are artifacts, others are not. Okay. Artifacts need to be maintained, then archived at the end of the project. Now, notice here that project documents are not components of the project management plan. Okay, this is where these are project documents. So please take a screenshot. And let me know when you're done. Okay,
Got it.
I'm going to, you got it? All right. So especially with adaptive and hybrid projects, what you're going to be doing is what's called collaborative planning. Okay? Where not just the project manager does the planning. You've got various roles that participate in it. Okay. So the hierarchy here is product owner decides the objectives and according to customer needs and wants. Okay. That determines what the product backlog is, and then the sprint backlogs are built from that. Okay. Team members have a say in how things get planned, when they can be delivered. Uh, and, and the way to think about this, think about the product owner owning what needs to be done and the team owning how it's going to be done. Okay. All right. So, let me get back there. All right. The team is going to execute the planned work. Okay. Team determines what they can deliver in each of the iterations or sprints. All right. The different life cycles have different planning requirements. With a hybrid or an adaptive project, you're going to be doing as much or more planning as if you're running a predictive project. So remember, we're planning at every iteration. And through the life cycle of a product, you can have, many tens of iterations. Okay. Now, with predictive, your requirements are going to be defined in very specific terms before development starts. Uh, with hybrid and adaptive projects, the requirements are going to be examined and elaborated on much more frequently. Okay. Hybrid, you're going to take a look at them periodically, every couple of sprints, or if you're using phase gates, at each of the gates. Adaptive, you're going to be taking a look at the requirements, specifications for each sprint. Okay. Product owner needs to have his or her finger on what the customer needs. Okay. And we've gone over these. Outcomes, everything is delivered in one lump at the end of a predictive project. With hybrid projects, you can have multiple deliverables all through the product life cycle. Okay. With adaptive, you're going to be delivering value at the end of each iteration. Now, whether you deliver that to the customer or not, that's the responsibility of the product manager and the product owner. Okay. You can deliver at the end of each sprint. At the same time, the customer needs to be able to be ready to accept those deliverables. Now, as far as change is concerned, you usually need an act of Congress, and we know how. I won't get political, but changes are constrained as much as possible. So if there is a change that's required for a project, you need to go through a change control board. You need to let additional teams know what the impact is on them of that change. And it takes a lot of effort to put a change through. Okay, with the hybrid project, you can incorporate changes in at periodic intervals. Changes for adaptive projects are incorporated at the beginning of each sprint. Once you have the sprint planned out, you want to stick to that sprint plan. Okay, stakeholders, all the way from just at specific milestones for a predictive project. Now, you're going to have them usually at the phase gates to at least observe and make sure that the project's meeting their expectations. Oh, quit that on me. You're going to have regular stakeholder involvement with the hybrid project, and the stakeholders are going to be involved continuously if you have an adaptive project. May not be directly with the development team, and at least with the product owner. With the predictive project, you're going to identify all the risks that you can upfront and plan for how to mitigate those risks. You may not identify everything, so you have to have, again, involve the change control board if you need to address a risk that's going to perhaps jeopardize the delivery schedule, the content, or the cost. Hybrid, you're going to progressively elaborate the plans throughout the life of the project. And so at usually regular intervals, you're going to take a look at what risks are still out there, how to mitigate them, and hopefully retire some of the risks. Okay. With adaptive, you're going to be doing risk assessments throughout the life cycle. I mean, every sprint, you're going to take a look at risks. Now, cost controls for the test, realize that is another, for adaptive projects, that's something else that is done regularly. Evaluating the cost of developing the product. Now, with SAFE, what we want to do ideally is fund the entire ART, the Agile Release Train, that consists of all the development teams, everybody involved with that particular product for a period of time that's usually a year. And the amount of work that the team can deliver is based on the capabilities of the teams rather than any of the cost constraints. Okay. Any questions on this matrix? Okay. As I said, we were just going through the first section of lesson 3. And that's it for tonight. Any questions?
Not at this time, Harry. Thank you.
Okay. Well, make good use of your of 14 minutes and 57 seconds of JF. And have a great night.
You too.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You
Harry.
too.
Thank you, Harry.
Whoever